Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. I'm Councilmember Will Jawando, the chair of the Education and Culture Committee, joined by my colleagues, Councilmembers Albernaz and Mink. Today's session, we have one item. We're receiving an update on the Anti-Hate Task Force cohort's recommendations related to MCPS. As the members who are here today know, I've participated in several of the meetings, the subgroups, and my office participated in many of the other subgroups. I committed this committee to taking up the education-related recommendations from the task force, and so we're doing that today, and really appreciate all the work that went into these. I know this is can be difficult conversations, but it's really important. You know, we all often talk about how wonderfully diverse our community is, boasting 4 of the top 10 most diverse cities in the United States of America. But with that comes not only great food and cultural activities, a responsibility to work hard to make sure every community is heard, respected, cared for, and has the opportunity to thrive. And that is continual work. It requires vigilance. It requires recommitment. And this issue is a perfect example of that. Everyone on this council and on this committee is committed to making sure that there is no tolerance for hate bias of any kind in Montgomery County, and that we stand together in that. But how we get there and how we send that message, and what do we specifically do, and how do we have the right education and training, those are all things that we have to decide, right? It doesn't just happen. So this is part of that process, and I want to thank my colleagues on the council and the committee. This was a unanimous commitment from everybody to engage in this work. And so today we are going to get an overview from the various cohort leads that are here, some in person, some virtually. And I'll ask Mr. Krupe in a moment to call them up. And then we'll have 5-minute presentations. And we don't have our clock, but I'll be timing you. We have 5-minute presentations on the highlights, particularly if you could hone in related to MCPS and the college, both Montgomery College and USG. We have representatives from MCPS and from the college here today. And then we'll dig in and ask some questions and see if we can come up with some good next steps on how to make sure we do this work better in the county. Given the topic, colleagues, do you want to say anything before we start? No? Okay. I did okay. Mr. Krupe, anything to add?
Nothing to add. I believe we have the representatives from the LGBTQ+ cohort and the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander cohort joining virtually, and the representatives from the Muslim cohort, the Latino Hispanic cohort, the Jewish cohort, and the African American Black cohort joining us in person.
Wonderful. And that's a great segue. If you could join us, the members of the cohort, join us up on the dais. And we have Mr. Montaloni from MCPS, and I know I saw Susan Madden from college. So we'll thank you for coming, and we will, and other colleagues from MCPS that are here, we will bring you up once we move to the questions part. Do we have them teed up in any particular order? Are there? Okay, so we're just going to go in the way you get to go first. Sure. If you could, yeah, I'm absolutely sure. Yeah, so if you could, why don't we do this first? If everyone can introduce themselves, and then we'll start. Then we'll come back and start with Meredith Weisel from the Anti-Jewish Task Force cohort. Anti-Hate Jewish Hate Task Force. You know what I mean. Thank you. Yes, please introduce yourself first.
Meredith Weisel with the Jewish cohort from the Anti-Hate Task Force.
That's a better way to say it.
Good afternoon, Chair Jawando, Councilmember Albernaz, and Mink. I'm Ron Wright with the Black and African American Anti-Hate Task Force cohort.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Vasquez, and I am with the Latino Hispanic cohort.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this meeting. My name is Ilhan Kagri from the Muslim cohort of the Anti-Hate Task Force.
To our folks online.
I can go first. My name is Philip Alexander Downey, pronouns he, him, and I am from the LGBTQ+ cohort.
Thank you. Do we have, okay, and we don't have Ariana, so if she joins, just let us know. So Ms. Weisel, we'll start with you. 5 minutes to give us kind of the overview, and then also just any MCPS specific or education related specific recommendations.
Sure, and since the full council has heard most of the recommendations already, I think it's just probably prudent to just kind of tell you where we are, and also some things that are transpiring actually in Annapolis right now, which are probably going to impact some of the decisions that this committee is going to make, and then the council body as a whole as well. And so what I will just, you have in your packet the full presentation. Some of the most important things that the Jewish cohort really wanted to focus on was increasing community awareness of understanding of anti-Semitism, and that anti-Semitism is not just about the Holocaust, which is where many people think about it. Anti-Semitism has had a long history. It is known as the oldest hatred because it has existed for millennia. And so understanding that the Holocaust is an important chapter in the book on anti-Semitism, probably one of the most egregious chapters that we have seen, but that is not just about Holocaust education, which is where we tend to focus in our schools on. And so looking at some of that specifically, and I know MCPS has definitely been looking related to that. Looking at the slides what we had put together, also taking into context how hate and bullying in general are impacted by coming from bias. And so a lot of the bullying incidents, whether it's against the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Black community, LGBTQ+, any of the communities, also understanding that some of it is not just related to education of faculty, but also how it is impacting our students in the bullying concept. And that is something that we are continuing to see throughout a lot of our communities. And particularly right now, since October 7th, we have seen a dramatic increase. I can specifically speak to anti-Semitism, but I also know that it is impacting the Muslim community. And ADL, where many of you know I work, actually put out a guide specifically on anti-Muslim bias as well, because we were starting to hear from individuals. And so I think that context is important right now as we are looking at it. So some of the things that we talked about in the slides was educating about Holocaust education and anti-Semitism awareness, and looking at that it's not just the teachers in the classrooms, but faculty throughout the entire school body. Everything from the administration down, because sometimes it could be the individual who is working in the counselor's office. It could be a confidant who is just a faculty member but not an individual teacher. So I think that that's a context that we need to consider. And so when you look at MCPS on the slides, it really was just very specific to legislating education about the Holocaust and other genocides, because we do think that that is still something that is very relevant. And just so you know, there is legislation, not just a county bill that was introduced by Delegate Corman. There's now a statewide bill that is actually part of the speaker's package that is being considered. There's a hearing on Monday that talks about Holocaust education, but it also talks about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia specifically, and that is probably going to have an impact on all of our county school boards. We do expect that it probably will pass. That's what we're hearing. We'll know, in the coming weeks, so take that into account. But honestly, that should not impact what Montgomery County wants to do. And then the other aspect, as I said, specifically was train all MCPS faculty and teachers about the history of anti-Semitism, and not just in the context of the Holocaust, but how the history of Judaism and what we have seen throughout history, and how we are seeing some of it manifest today. And so with that, I will pass it to my colleague to my left, unless you're, I don't know if you're doing questions.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think we're all going to have questions of all of you, so
That's fine.
we'll go through the presentations and then we'll come back. Mr. Wright?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hit your mic thing.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. And thanks for having us back out again. Of course, we all know that this is still an ongoing issue. When we started this process, we knew that the bigger numbers were impacting the Black and African American community, not only within MCPS, but throughout the county. And so this upsurge or uptick, whatever you want to call it, continues. You certainly cannot do this work in a vacuum. So we continue to look to the current stakeholders who continue to compile data on hate, hate bias, and hate incidents to determine where do we have these situations and how do we engage. I would just like to start with a few disclaimers, if you will, Council Member, because I don't think, given the time permitted by the cohorts, or at least by our cohort, we could not be as thorough in the process to deliver what I believe would be some of the more effective recommendations. So it also informs that I think this process needs to be ongoing. So I'll just give you these disclaimers. We believe the cohort work was limited in scope and thoroughness because of limited time and resources. The cohort couldn't fairly research and analyze and measure what stakeholders are doing right through establishes policies, practices, and programming to accurately determine what it should change, amend, or enhance going forward. Cohorts' actions and fact-finding were also limited, not just by the limited time and resources, but also by the need to untangle and figure out respective stakeholders' overlapping roles and responsibilities to victims in addressing and eradicating hate crimes, bias, and hate incidences. Also, the cohort's efforts and work was further limited because of lack of time to determine the root causes of hate and hate bias and hate incidents. And finally, we believe the cohort work was somewhat, in the members, polarized by the Israel-Gaza war and its work. And its recommendations were somewhat overshadowed by this conflict and by the seemingly ensuing cultural wars and conflicts that play out in our communities, of course, to the detriment of our work. So Black American and African American cohorts work is, as you know, is limited to the available information from stakeholders, MCPS listening sessions, community surveys, and to a few virtual public meetings that we had. And though we presented numerous recommendations that we believe could be helpful to reducing or eradicating hate in Montgomery County, of course, we are also complaining about, again, the efficacy of the MCPS reporting system and the lack of response and enforcement and punishments. The current reporting system must provide clarity and uniformity on the proper use of the complaint forms to help restore some confidence in the students that their complaints will be heard and acted upon. And finally, we can all appreciate that there's a huge trust factor in the whole process. And when you think about what we value the most in this county, as it's indicated how much we spend on the school budget, which is half of the budget, we have to find a way to have our students to feel that they're safe, so they will prosper and benefit from the return on investment that we're putting in our system. Thank you for your time, council members.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Ms. Vasquez.
Awesome. All right, good afternoon, and once again, thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of our recommendations. I first want to just start off by saying and uplifting that, as Ron has stated, this is an evolving process, and it has been an evolving process for the Latino and Hispanic cohort. And today, we are putting forth recommendations that we initially did not put in your packet, but we've been also continuing the work on having discussions with educators, students, parents within our community. Just to provide some context for today's hearing, right, despite the Latino population making up about 20.3% of our county, in Montgomery County Public Schools, it sees a higher representation at 34.6%. And this demographic is notably significant, with 36% of all kindergarteners in the school year 2022-2023 school year being Latino. So I just wanted to provide that context for you in today's discussion. As noted, right, you did not see specific recommendations in your packet, and we have two reasons. First is foremost, right, we thought that the absence of youth representation within the task force was glaring, especially considering they are the demographic most affected by reported hate bias incidents. Without their input and really having them at the table, sharing with us firsthand experiences, but helping us navigate through the systems that are currently in place, right? We felt that it was challenging to create authentic recommendations specifically for Montgomery County Public Schools. Furthermore, there was concerns about data accuracy that arose not only just for the Latino Hispanic community, but in general. While Montgomery County Public Schools has a structured system for reporting hate and bias incidents, other entities may lack such mechanisms, leading to potential not only underreporting, as it's often lifted, right, but perhaps skewing perceptions of which groups are most impacted or affected. So, for example, we want to know what our friends over at Park and Recreation, how do they report? Do they report? Do they not? Do they underreport? Someone working as a grocery store clerk at Giant, right? Local businesses. If there's a lack of reporting overall and there's a lack of education on this subject, then it could really potentially put a lot of burden on Montgomery County Public Schools as the ultimate perpetrator of anti-bias hate incidents. And so we just wanted to uplift that. But in light of the complexities, we do have some recommendations for today's hearing. The first and foremost biggest challenge and barrier continues to be that we need to increase funding and capacity for interpretation and translation services. That has always been an obstacle for our community, and it continues to be a challenge, especially if we are trying to convey a very complex just the complexities of just anti-bias and hate incidences, right? We're reporting that a staggering 40% of Montgomery County's Latinx population still requires interpretation and translation services, and having access to those services, right, or not access to those services continues to pose significant barriers, not only with educators, but with students and parents. In our conversation with several educators that we had the opportunity to talk to within the last few weeks throughout the county, that continues to be for educators one of the biggest obstacles, where they have repeatedly asked for translation services, and unfortunately they are most times not readily available. And so it then shifts the burden to the youth or the student to translate for their families, right, and hindering their educational experience and exacerbating inequities, especially if they have to translate educational materials regarding, for in this particular case, bias and hate incidents for their parents, right? I just want everyone to kind of just take a moment to just, I don't know if anyone's ever translated, but translating is exhausting. And it's a skill that needs to be developed in order to have maximum impact. And so now imagine a kid having to go home and wanting to tell their parent regarding a bias or hate incident that they experienced or witnessed, but they can't convey or communicate that to the educator because there is no translation services. Having to translate that emotion and relive the trauma often deters a conversation altogether in our communities, right? Whether it's from English to Spanish or from Spanish to English. And if it does get translated, the parents often need more education and understanding of what just took place. And so, in our cohort, right, we talked about that being as the biggest challenge, but oftentimes it's just part of our everyday experience that it's so stressful getting that conveyed, right, that we might as well just keep it moving. So that's the first one. Second one is continuing to enhance anti-bias and hate training and implementation. Once again, educators, parents, and students report feeling ill-equipped to handle incidents of hate and bias due to rush and inadequate training, right, from the interviews that we've done. Oftentimes, educators feel that there is a big resource packet that gets thrown at them with limited amount of time to review it, and it's basically, good luck, let us know if you need anything, right? And so I know MCPS is really working hard and have brought us in the process of really drafting a system to improving the quality and depth of anti-bias training. But the biggest thing that educators continue to tell us is that the follow-up and implementation mechanisms are not there. Last but not least, the last recommendation that we have is just continuing to invest in wraparound programs, right, is essential. Many Latino Hispanic households, not just in our community, but other communities, continue to grapple with economic instability, and it's forcing children to navigate life's challenges largely unsupported. And increasing funding and finding ways for MCPS to increase wraparound programs that provide comprehensive support to families is crucial for nurturing stable and thriving communities. So in conclusion, our recommendations underscore the pressing need for proactive measures to address systemic barriers and promote equity within the Montgomery County's educational landscape. And we believe that prioritizing investment in translation services, enhancing training, or making it better, right, for educators, parents, and students, and bolstering wraparound service programs can really pave the way for a more inclusive and equitable future. However, these efforts can only bear fruit with steadfast commitment to thorough implementation and follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vasquez. Ms. Cagri.
Thank you. So one of the things is that the task force, it was efficient in the sense that we were broken up into cohorts, but it was unfortunate that we were broken up into cohorts because we weren't able to coordinate. It turns out that many of the recommendations, were across the board kinds of recommendations. And particularly for the Muslim community in the county, it's a very diverse community. Many Muslims are people of color, and so they are impacted by the racism that exists in this country. So we were very gratified to hear the recommendations of ethnicity, and there's no sort of cohort or silo that you can put them into. So this is the group that we ended up representing. And unfortunately, we are in crisis mode. Since October, it's now in the 5th month, there has been carnage going on in the Middle East, in Gaza, and it has impacted our community. Our community feels that if we do not speak up, it is immoral. Our children go to bed crying at nights because they know what's happening. And people, we've heard about World War II and genocide, and we hate it, and we abhor it, and we said never again. And if we see it happening again, then we have been sort of programmed morally to speak out against any kind of genocide that's happening or any kind of injustice in any scale, but particularly in that scale. So what's happened as a result of that is there's been a lot of bullying against Arab, Muslim students, actually even Jewish students who speak out against what's going on. There's been doxing. I think you all know that my own 14-year-old granddaughter was doxed. And let's just define what doxing is. Her picture appeared on a flyer with her name on it, and it was spread all over the streets, and it told what school she went to. And for the first time in my life, I felt nervous about my children because their last name, there's only one family with that last name in the whole area. So you look at her name and you say, okay, this is who it is. And I was afraid my son's going to be gunned down or knifed or whatever, because it does happen. It has happened. Palestinians have been killed. They've been shot. And if somebody is, actually the poster, I forgot to tell you, the poster said leading anti-Semite on it. So here's this 14-year-old who actually is not an activist. She was not an activist. On a small private Instagram account, she posted something about what was going on in Gaza. And for that, she was labeled a leading anti-Semite, which is rich, considering that my family is very diverse. My mother's Jewish. So, that really hit us the wrong way. And in fact, I have relatives who died in gas chambers during the Holocaust. So, it's not fair to look at Muslims as people who are prejudiced against Jews. They cannot be. There's lots of mixed marriages. However, we do speak out against the injustice. So in terms of our recommendations, one of the recommendations that came up because of the crisis is we would like an ombudsman for reporting, because there's no way to report. When we have meetings with the county executive, with the police, they say, well, there's really not much reporting going on, or there's zero reporting. And that's not because people don't want to report, it's because they cannot report. I could not report. The only way that I could report is by calling someone in the county executive's office to sort of prod the police to take my problem, my issue. There was another woman who, also was attacked. I mean, her car was attacked and, she was beaten down on. And she also could not report again until she called the office of the county executive and got help from them. So this is a big problem. In the school system, children cannot report because they feel like they're not going to be listened to. They're not going to find the sympathy that they need. And what the schools need to do is, instead of putting their heads in the sand, is to talk about the issue. They have to allow people to talk about the issue. And it cannot be one-sided. It has to allow open discussion, and to avoid it saying this is difficult is just going to create more and more problems. And when schools react to issues, it's because they didn't take it up front. The whole school system has to say, look, you know what, this is not going to go away. Actually, it's getting worse. So we need to be more proactive about saying, how is it that we can open up debate? How is it that we can make this a safe place for everybody? For our Jewish students, for the Jewish students who have families in Israel. I myself have family in Israel. And also for those students, whether they be Jewish or Christian or Muslim, whatever they are, those students that want to speak out against what is happening in Gaza, or in Israel for that matter. We have to make sure that there is a safe space for them to open, and that if there's any kind of hate against these students, that they can complain somehow, that there's some kind of restorative justice. There's a place they can go to where somebody's going to sympathize and say, I understand this is hard for you. Let's get a handle on this. And that is not what is happening. What is happening is kids are being shut up. Kids are being told, look, don't say anything. Parents can't complain. I'm on listservs that say, people have actually been attacked in the street, and they say, I'm afraid to go to the police for fear of the pushback that I'll get. There are now 4 teachers that have been fired because of their posts on social media accounts that were deemed political. So this is a situation that the county council has to take into account, and the school board also has to take into account. One final thing, there's a bill right now in the state legislature about anti-Semitism training and Islamophobic training for all school system staff and teachers. We're very worried about this. Which definition of anti-Semitism are you going to use? If you take the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, it says criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. So how are we going to deal with that? This is not going to work. It can't be dictated down. The school systems need to deal with these on their own. So I would urge the school system, I heard the board was going to be talking about it tonight. I would urge them to say, no, thank you, we can handle this on our own. We don't need to have our sort of problems dealt with at the state level. The counties should take care of it. That's why we have school boards at different counties. So I find our community finds this bill problematic, even though on the surface it seems like, oh, what a good thing this is. We're going to be teaching about, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Actually, it should be about racism in general. As Mr. Wright pointed out, the people who suffered the brunt of hatred in this country, the brunt of prejudice, the brunt of discrimination are black people in this country. So, that should be top number one. So that's that. So again, I'm coming back to, I think I would really appreciate this county council to put money aside for an ombudsman where all reporting can go in. So we have some kind of handle on what's going on. Are Muslims in danger? Are they being attacked? Are their children being bullied? Are they seeing all kinds of problems? And not just Muslims, Jewish community, the LGBTQ community, the Hispanic community. It has to be an independent ombudsman just to collect the data so that we as a county can say, what does it look like? What's the problem we have? How big is the problem in this county? Or how little? We need to know. So
Thank you.
I would encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our LGBTQ cohort, you're next.
Okay. Wonderful. Again, thank you all for having me. My name again is Philip Alexander Downey, he, him pronouns, and I'm a lifelongish resident of Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm co-chair for the Anti-Hate Task Force LGBTQ cohort and chairperson for Montgomery County Pride Family and MoCo Pride Center, Inc. As a queer first-generation American with Jamaican and U.S. parentage, a graduate of Montgomery County Public Schools from Head Start through 12th grade, and a Montgomery College graduate, I have experienced firsthand the need for destigmatizing notions of queerness and gender expansiveness in our public education system, as well as our homes and communities of Montgomery County. And the need to really promote the authentic inclusion of all of the amazingly diverse identities that make up our communities. As community members, we understand the need for strong public education systems. Our public education system should be reflective of the communities and individuals that comprise it. For young people and families, education, of course, does not stop outside of the classroom. Learning and education take place in every facet of our schools and communities. I will continue to reiterate that LGBTQ plus people exist in every facet of our society since humanity's beginnings. However, hate for gender and sexuality diversity is a modern concept with pervasive and detrimental consequences. According to the ACLU and Trevor Project, 589 anti-LGBTQIA plus bills were introduced in 2023 across 49 states, including Maryland. In addition to the dangerous legislation, national hateful rhetoric against queer and trans people continue to make the natural existence of LGBTQ folks, their lives, a struggle in almost every facet. Fortunately, Montgomery County has passed some groundbreaking protections in the past, and some of the county council folks who are on here have been a part of that groundbreaking legislation. But one of the continuous themes that you will hear throughout my short talk today is the need to assess the implementation of those policies, because the students, families, and young people that we, not only the school system has constant reports of, that we get constant anecdotal evidence about how these particular inclusive policies, not only do they not go far enough, but the implementation is, in a word, just unacceptable. And in a few words, it goes further in almost re-traumatizing students by creating barriers to access of essential services like using a restroom. So we need to ensure inclusion in all public education spaces is celebrated and, of course, strengthened. We need to ensure that we continue to fight bigotry by making resources, inclusive curricula, and texts accessible. We need to stand unwavering in our current codified inclusive policies, text, and education, while simultaneously strengthening policies to be more inclusive and reflective of our communities, providing further inclusion for those not seen and traditionally represented in our classrooms and texts. And we must ensure the appropriate implementation of vital policy measures, as I said. In March of 2023, the CDC released the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey that found that a staggering 69% of queer youth reported feeling persistently sad and hopeless, which is double the rate of their heterosexual peers. The pandemic only exacerbated this crisis, with LGBTQ plus high school students being 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual counterparts. These disparities extend to violence as well. LGBTQ plus high school students face higher rates of bullying, threats, injuries, and dating violence. And perhaps one of the most heart-wrenching statistics is that during the pandemic, 20% of queer students reported being physically abused by a parent or other adult in their homes. This is double the rate of their heterosexual peers. The survey, and this is just noting when I use the language LGBTQ, it's because the survey did not track and delve into the detrimental effects on trans and non-binary youth, which on national average is 4 times that of their heterosexual peers. So our education recommendations are to expand MCPS's professional development days by at least 30%. And we're looking to provide culturally competent and community-derived professional development and trainings for every level of school staff to ensure they have the actual tools and a supportive environment to create inclusive environments while staying abreast of changing science, trends, and social dynamics. We want to ensure and enforce current anti-harassment policies and reporting. We must assess, strengthen, and monitor the current implementations of inclusive schools, programs, texts, and policies to ensure their effectiveness in meeting the needs of our youth and families. We have a plethora of accounts, as I said before, from a plethora of anecdotal accounts from students that just talk about the different policies that we have in place in Montgomery County, that it's not just that they don't exist, but the implementation is either not supported in their schools and sometimes used as a tool against them. If students are forced to utilize barely functioning, inaccessible, gender-neutral restrooms, we have failed. If students are forced to be ridiculed by other classmates because a non-supportive faculty environment, then we failed. If students are being outed to parents, which endangers their safety and well-being, we failed. If educators and public school staff utilize dead names to intentionally disrespect and unaffirm a student's identity, we failed. If our homes, communities, and places of education make our young people or families feel that their authentic identities have no place and our youth cannot see themselves in adulthood, then we've certainly failed. Our measures of success cannot just be the policies we write or platitudes spoken, but how the implementation of those policies are carried out to mitigate the very real and persistent danger many of our Montgomery County youth and families feel. So thank you all so much for your time and thoughtful actions on this matter. As a lot of our colleagues on the Anti-Hate Task Force has pointed out, and have been talking about intersectionality. And it is extremely important to outline the fact that when those identities begin to intersect, then you are experiencing oppression on every single level of your identity. If you are first generation and you may have an accent or a language barrier, and you also happen to be black and brown, or also happen to be a religious minority, if you are also an LGBTQ person on top of that, you are often facing hate and bias on a level that people can't really fathom, and sometimes you don't know where it's coming from or how it's directed. But ensuring that we are not only creating these safe and inclusive environments for our students, but for all MCPS families and staff and faculty at every level, will allow for our community members as well as youth, and then into senior citizens, into when they're aging at the end of life, making sure that they don't have to go back into the closet, which also often unfortunately happens inside of our aging communities when there aren't supportive environments. So we learn so much from youth as they do from us. I feel like they're often teaching us more, and we just need to ensure that they are well taken care of and have a community future. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us. I know Ms. Ariane Ang has been detained. She has an issue she had to deal with, so she wasn't able to join. Her recommendations from the AAPI group are in the packet. I will just uplift a few because and then we'll turn to questions. One that really stuck out to me, kind of ending where Mr. Downey, or picking up where Mr. Downey left off, was investing in cross-community solidarity. That was their recommendation. And when you talk about intersectionality, not only the layering of different communities that have been impacted with anti-hate or with hate bias or anti-whatever community they're in, or multiple communities, working together and understanding how that interacts together. I think I'm hearing from all of you there needs to be some more intentionality put into that space. Just from the meetings that I've attended of the task force, it was more of a reporting out. There wasn't a lot of time for that, and I think that's really important. They also talked about, which I think is also super important for all communities, particularly the AAPI community, which is very diverse in this county, almost 15% of our population, so many different cultures and languages spoken. They lifted up the need for supporting their organizations and understanding better the diversity of the 14 plus ethnic groups that make up the AAPI community here in the county and what their needs are. I think I will say, just for myself, one who strives to do that, there's always work to be done in that area. With that, I'm going to just start with a few questions, and thank you all for being concise with your comments. And I know and I'll turn to my colleagues, and we're probably going to. I know we have a bunch of MCPS folks here, so Mr. Monteleone, could you just come on up, because I am going to need you for my questions, and I'm sure if there's anyone else from your team that you think needs to come up, they can come up as we ask questions. The issue of youth representation, it's troubled me that several of you have brought this up, that there was not youth representation. But I also heard from you, Mr. Wright, that you all, I think in the cohort, and I remember when I joined, you went out and proactively asked, even though it wasn't part of the mandate, to bring youth in. Is that what you did?
That's correct, Councilmember. Yes, we did. We had a listening session that involved a wide cross-section of middle and high school students, and probably about 80 different schools. So
now I know there has been, and this is MCPS can comment, but it sounds like I saw everyone nodding. Would you agree that that's something that there needs to be more coordinated work around youth? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, we didn't put it in the report, but we have talked to youth, and we hear from them on a regular basis. All of us who make up the Jewish cohort are individuals, and so a lot of these recommendations, and there was definitely more that we didn't put in here, but I think that a listening session, probably with youth from the various cohorts, and probably each of us could make recommendations of some of the youth to be a part of it, and probably before the county council would be very beneficial. They're the ones day in and day out. My own child has faced a lot of issues in both the intersectionality of being bisexual and being Jewish, and she herself would probably be somebody, I'll just say, who would want to have her voice lifted up on the issues that she has faced. So yes.
That's where the rubber meets the road. So
yeah.
MCPS, could you comment on what you've done in this area I think we need to have it anyway at some form at the council. I would just say that up front, but I know you all have been doing some of this work. You want to speak to that and introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Sure, and thank you to Chair Giwando and certainly Chairman Albanez and Chairperson Mink. And to my friends here, many of whom I've worked with in various capacities on various committees, and we did meet with several of the task force members at an invitation to go over the recommendations and look at a crosswalk of where those recommendations are in our current plan. So it's really great to be here. So with respect to how we engage students, we do this all the time, and many times, I would say most often, this is not something that is an event at the district level. And I'm sure that I'm joined here by Director Anthony Alston of the Equity Unit, whose team facilitates study circles. They have been doing this for years, for probably a decade or longer now, and have been doing this, and they are doing it, I'm sure they are doing it today and last week, and we'll be doing it next week in schools to discuss this very topic. So we do most of this through an organic process at the school level. And as an educator, what I can tell you as a former principal is that students are in cases where they're discussing, a lot of times they like to be around trusted adults that they know in their building, and also have like that professional outside facilitation. So we certainly do that ongoing. In terms of our work that we've done, as part of the work over just the last couple of months, we've met with all of the Montgomery County student government leaders that work with our SMOB and work with Ms. Shella Cherry. We've engaged the Minority Scholars group as well, just on the work that we're currently talking about now. But we've done a series of focus groups, right? And this is going back to last year. And I really want to state that. This isn't just something that we started on October 7th or even this past summer when we became involved with the task force. So we do focus groups all the time, and we are constantly seeking input from students and a variety of students, right, of all backgrounds and levels. So that's kind of a broad brush, but I do want to speak to the fact that we did engage students specifically on our draft framework that we are moving forward through the board process now.
And how was that collected and reported out? Like, so you have the study circle process. I've seen some of that. You engaged the student government leaders, which is a great group to engage, obviously, but it always can be broader. Was that collected and shared, and with who was it shared with? Yeah.
So I'll just speak to the most recent work that we've been involved with, and Dr. Alston can speak to the work that Study Circles does. But we had a feedback form that we have shared to collect the responses, and we can categorize those and sort those through a Google Sheet. We have not shared out publicly, right, all of the different feedback responses yet. We are in the process of putting all of this together in a presentation to the Board of Education on, I believe, March 19th. All right. But what I can tell you is that there are some really good recommendations, as has been noted, from our kids. Right? They will tell us the truth, and they will tell us what is necessary. But where we are with that right now is we are that now we had a meeting this morning where we were looking at that feedback from a variety of groups, internal and external stakeholders. We have about 15 or 20 different listening sessions and feedback sessions with a variety of groups over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And we're sorting through that now. And we're going to go back and look for themes, right, and trends, and see where that feedback may need to be added into the plan, where it can be collated or joined perhaps to other action items that are in the plan. And so that is in process of being reviewed by staff right now, that specific part.
Appreciate that.
And then in addition to the groups that Mr. Monticello mentioned, we've also met with our Pride Alliance student groups to get feedback on that hate bias draft plan as well as from the culture of respect. We have feedback forms for that. In regards to study circles, the question that you asked previously. So when that data is collected, it is shared with the administrative team, the counseling team, the whole school team, so that they're aware. It's also forwarded to the directors or associates that supports that school, so that they're aware as they begin to align the resources that are needed to move the school forward and support.
Thank you. And I want to we had a very in-depth session here at the committee on the anti-racism audit and the work that's been several years in the making that I think is really strong. And again, the rubber meets the road when how we implement the recommendations and move forward. But I think it's a good first step, and obviously needs to be integrated into this. To our staff here, I want to make sure we have a follow-up session after the board gets the presentation on that youth feedback. We're going to want to incorporate that and hear from you on that. So really appreciate that. The other question I had, you heard a lot about ombudsman and reporting. That came through in different ways in all the recommendations. I don't, if you can speak to it, are you looking into an ombudsman type situation? And if you could speak to what I heard as consistency around concern with the reporting process. And I've heard this as I visited schools as well, right? It's that people either feel it's not going to be taken seriously, they don't, they're concerned whether people have the appropriate training and information to even deal with the issue, right? So there's a lot of different reasons people don't come forward. So just if you could talk about how the school system is addressing and any changes you are looking into as far as reporting and improving that system, or the ombudsman issue.
Certainly. So when we say ombudsman, we currently have one, right, for the Board of Education.
Right. I'm talking about specifically for hate.
Yeah, I wanted to just clarify that for all of the millions of listeners
Thank you.
who may be at home. But sorry, I stole that line.
That's all right. It's not trademark.
Yeah, okay. But in all seriousness, there are two pieces, and as I look at the crosswalk here and noting, for example, in the African American Black cohort, one of the things I do want to say is that we have had over the last several months, clearly we're in an evolving position of leadership at MCPS right now, but we did begin and have commenced the Superintendent's Advisory Group for Safety, Security, and Hate Bias. There were a couple of those, but I know Dr. Alston can speak to this, we also have, as one of the pieces to move forward, is to put together an internal and external stakeholder group that would meet periodically, say quarterly, to review these data, to look at the actions that we have implemented, to have a level of accountability. I think this is in the interest of not only the community, but also in MCPS to stay close to the voice of the community and to stay so that we can be proactively communicating what we are doing. One last piece on reporting, and I know Mr. Edmondson, who is centered in the reporting process for the Office of Student Welfare and Compliance. We did work with multiple groups, but in a lot of ways with Identity last year and Black and Brown Coalition and the NAACP on the reporting issue. And so we had a listening session completely in Spanish that was co-chaired by Identity and folks in my office, not translated, in Spanish, and ran through scenarios of reporting to clarify. If you report, this is what you can expect. For that community in particular at a request. We then translated all of our reporting forms into all 7 languages that MCPS has under its umbrella. These forms are now no longer paper and pencil. They are electronic. They are available on the MCPS website on the
So that just changed.
That was last spring,
Yeah.
I believe,
Yeah.
is when those changes were made. We are currently exploring with technology and with website evolution to be able, you may recall during COVID, there was like hot button information at the top of each school's banner, right? So if you wanted to have information on any COVID information, it would have been there. We're looking at ways with our technology office right now for the next school year so that parents, many of whom go to their school's website as opposed to the central office website, so that that information is easily available in all languages as a tile on that webpage. We are also exploring, based on feedback from students, QR codes, things like this, to get to the 21st century and have these available on, like, in the hallways of schools or on student canvas platforms and things of this nature. But I do think if Dr. Alston has things to add.
And then also in Mr. Edmonton's office, they recently received a $20,000 grant from Maryland State Department of Education to focus solely on the campaigning of how do we better advertise our reporting structures and systems for our students, our families, and our communities.
Can I add one other piece of this? And I heard it.
I don't think this will be last time you get a question about reporting.
Sure. So I heard this implicitly in some of the comments from the folks from the task force, and this is something that we have heard. I was present. I believe Dr. Alston and Mr. Edmondson were also present at the African American and Black Zoom meeting that we had with students. And a lot of the feedback we hear, not just from our Black and African American students, but I would hear this as a principal as well, is like, I want this kid suspended, right? Or I want to know what happened to that kid, or get, the pound of flesh. We want to know. We submit this report, and we don't know what happened to the alleged offender, and that's because we're not going to communicate what happens. And I think sometimes we try to be very clear on this process. Just because you submit a form does not mean that you are going to have all the information of what occurs with the person of whom these allegations are against. However, there are things that we can and should do better after that form is reported,
right,
and bringing these to scale. And some of those things are such as this: continuously updating the parent, letting the parent know what the safety plan is, right? We have a safety plan if we have to change schedules, if we provide escorts to class back and forth, if we are possibly looking at an administrative placement, right? There are a lot of different things that we can do. A COSA request that the parent may have put in, change of school assignment. So we can do a better job, as been indicated through the feedback, outside of letting you know what happened to the person allegedly who did this. We can certainly keep you abreast of your student's station in the school and what we're doing to keep them safe, right? And ensure that they not only are physically safe, but social, emotionally safe, provided with restorative justice or social worker support, so on and so forth.
I appreciate that, and that's really important. Last thing we want is students to be so discouraged that they just feel they have nowhere to go and don't know how to do it. I'm going to pause there. I'll come back, put myself in the queue, and go to Councilmember Alvarez.
Well, Councilmember,
Yes,
may I
Mr. Wright.
quickly try to respond to that? I don't disagree with what he just said, but I think there's a couple of dimensions to the students' responses. So they were adamant about not hearing back on their complaints, not so much concerned about whether or not
Not the
they
discipline,
heard.
just whether something happened at all.
Exactly,
Yeah.
council member. And I think it's hard to stomach that some of them were complaining about actions being committed by staff, teachers, and administrators. So that's clear
Yeah.
from the conversation we had from these students. I don't think I heard anything that was of the nature of an emergency situation, that they feared that a teacher or administrator would do them physical harm. But certainly we know that inaction sometimes is the gateway to physical harm to our students. So I just wanted to be clear about that, what we gathered from, albeit limited session with these students.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you said that, because the anti-racist audit, was clear in that a large number of students feel, from both other students and from faculty and staff, that there's an issue, and compounding that is not being responded to that something is happening, or knowing that something is happening. So I'm going to also ask Mr. Krupe and Ms. McGuire that I think this is something, the reporting process itself and the changes that you've talked about. I don't think we're going to go into every detail today, but that's something I want to come back to. I think it's kind of at the core of this, right? You can't have a anti-bias, anti-hate group if the reporting isn't fulsome and felt like by the people who are reporting that's going to be investigated. Councilmember Alvarez.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's so many different angles I can take here, but I want to start from this place and just once again thanking all of you for your continued dedication and leadership. You've all clearly put in so much thought and emotion and time in your recommendations and work, and I know that this is in addition to the myriad of other responsibilities you have personally, professionally, and civically. And I just want you to know that it's making a difference. It truly is. And just by virtue of this particular conversation and many others that happened before and will happen in the future, this matters, and I just want you to know that. And the timing continues to be really important, because there are so many issues beyond any of our control in this room or in this county that are impacting our community every single day. And so the angle I want to tackle this from, I often try to look at issues through SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I want to focus on opportunity here, because the beautiful thing about our school system, among the many beautiful things about our school system, is that we are one of the most diverse school systems in the entire country. Demographically, Montgomery County is about 40 years ahead of where the rest of the country, what the rest of the country is going to look like demographically. And that presents a huge opportunity. We once again heard just this week that 4 of the top 10 small cities in the United States of America are located here in Montgomery County. And so our students are experiencing that, they're feeling that, they're seeing that every single day. And if we do this right, if we create an environment where people can feel heard, where they can feel seen, where they can feel respect and frankly safe, then we are going to be preparing the next generation of kids to help tackle some of the very complex issues that our country and our world will continue to face and will face for generations to come. So that's why it's really critical for us to take the time and space to have what can be very difficult conversations that have no easy solutions or answers. As human beings, we try to process things in a way to be able to have things make sense, but sometimes that's very difficult, particularly in the world that we live in right now. Just yesterday, I'll just say it, there was an article that came out that the Trump administration plans to instill the draconian immigration policies that were enacted during his tenure, with parent separations from their families, encampments, and this is something he's running on, right? And of course, this is in addition to the myriad of other just tremendous complex challenges that our communities face every day. So I do have a couple of questions, but I'm going to start with a story. So I started out my career, I've talked about this a lot, in the youth development space. I worked for an organization called the Latin American Youth Center, and we were in Columbia Heights in the early 2000s. Columbia Heights is a fascinating part of the District of Columbia, and at the time, it was going through very radical change very quickly. It had been traditionally an African-American community, and there was a huge influx of Latino immigrants that were coming in at the time, coupled with a lot of gentrification that was happening that was displacing people left and right. And one of the most popular programs while I was at LAYC was a DJ class. And the DJ class literally taught kids how to become DJs for professional jobs at the time, which all of the kids needed. But something fascinating happened in that program. There was tremendous conflict, particularly between our black and brown community at the time, that was leading to violence. And the instructor of the program taught the class in such a way that he stripped the beats of the music of bachata, reggaeton, hip-hop, reggae, rap, and stripped them down to their core. And the origins were African. And he used that as a tool to be able to share. We have so much more in common than we do differences. And when you look at us genetically, we are 99.99999% the same. And so I think it's important for us to think about that as context, as we have, again, these very difficult conversations. But we are right now in the process as a council looking at seeing what more we can do in this space. And as Chair Jawando noted, a lot of work's been done by this council and the previous council, and a lot more work will need to be done in the future. But it's happening at an important time. There have been some well-documented challenges, particularly with our Department of Compliance and Investigation within MCPS, which they are focusing on. They are working on addressing those issues. That is the department within MCPS that's responsible for tracking bullying, sexual harassment, or other incidences, or what I don't, it looks like I didn't get that right. Go ahead.
I want to clarify, right? So Mr. Edmondson, who's behind us, is with student welfare.
I know that. I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a separate. I get that. I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's students, and what you're speaking to is adults.
I know that. I know that. That was going to be my point. And so those well-documented challenges within that office have led to questions about audits and whether or not there are similar challenges in the student welfare compliance office. And so I know this is something MCPS is taking very seriously, but as a follow-up to that investigation, we as a body have asked a number of questions about, the reporting, which has been brought up within several of the recommendations that have been made. So on a parallel track, we are focusing on the follow-up on where things stand in a very formal way, and we hope to get the responses to those questions very soon. But where I think we also need to go with this is a true partnership and alliance with our friends in the Board of Education. Because everyone here knows, but our public doesn't always understand, what the council has authority and responsibility and oversight of versus our colleagues in the board. But frankly, it really shouldn't matter, because we're all on the same team. And so I do think as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, it would make sense for us, whether it be in a formal committee session or potentially in some community engagement opportunity, but a meeting with our colleagues in the board collaboratively together, because there's only so much we can control. And I think that would make sense. With all that as context, just a couple of questions. There are student groups, there are parent associations, there are advocacy groups within MCPS right now that have been developed, charged with tackling this, maybe not from specifically the perspectives and angles that you all have brought, which have been tremendously helpful, but could there be a review or a list of some of those resources that may be currently available that students may have to be able to identify, and that may already exist. And it obviously has to be school by school, and it will change year by year. But I think letting folks know what already exists, not in terms of reporting, but just in terms of finding your tribe, finding folks who are in a position to be able to help you collaboratively and collectively, I think would be helpful. Suggestion, thought, any response to that? We may already have it, but.
So there's a couple different things, and I really want to parse out what I think I heard you say. So one is school by school supports for students, right? So social, emotional, whether they're restorative or what have you. We absolutely have all of that and have shared that with our schools and have that on every school's website and certainly on our central office website. Can we always be better? Always. About decreasing variability and increasing communication and clarity of what's available? 100%. So yes, and if that information is requested, we're happy to give that to you. I think the other piece of that is informing students, and this is something that is part of our work for our framework that we're bringing forward. So it's really broken down into three main areas. Prevention, right, / education on the front end. Incident, then the second pillar is more around incidents, reporting, right, and this last one about responding and restoring, right, what happens after the event. And in terms of the prevention and education, one, in addition to the adult learning that needs to happen that we heard as a theme, right, from the task force, is the student learning, right? And so while this has been variable, to be brutally honest, by school over the last several decades. And we do have a student culture of respect module that is specific to hate bias that all students are expected to take. But that is an event, right? It's a learning event. It's not a learning progression. It's not as embedded. We're working with our curriculum partners, and there's been many recommendations that have already been put into the curriculum to embed the information and the history of folks and different groups, right, in our curriculum. But the last piece that we need to get better on as a key piece of this is exactly what you said. When you report, what happens? What can you expect? Who should you talk to if you have questions, right? Who do you go to in your building if you need support throughout this process? That is an area of upgrade that is absolutely on our radar, and we are thinking of a series of things that we bring forward to our students in this area, right? That are not district-wide at this time, and that is certainly one of them.
So I would like to go back a little bit for the reporting also. Mm-hmm. And so as was mentioned, that second pillar, that second tier of our plan looks at that whole reporting structure and process, right, and how we better communicate that piece. But as we think about how it's currently done, every time a report comes in, it's sent to multiple individuals, right? One of them is my office, but Mr. Edmondson's office also sends a follow-up email to the schools in regards to ensuring that they follow up and do the closure form so that everything is then tracked so we can do that one-to-one correspondence. X number of reports came in, X number of closures, so that there is that one-to-one correspondence. When a report does come in, equity specialist is responsible for reaching out to that school and copying that respective director to find out what supports and resources are needed. We also have our new hate bias coordinator, which begins the 1st of March. That will be able to support also the coordination of that piece. We utilize our Strong Connections grant through Title IV in order to hire that individual to support. And then as we look at that coordinated support, it's looking at how does the equity specialist, how do our RJ specialists work alongside the schools to figure out what is the support that is needed to restore harm, but then also to educate and support it moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes?
Mm-hmm. If I could ask a question. There's an organization called ISPU, Institute for Social Policy Understanding, and they did research on prejudice, discrimination, and incidences of bias and hate among the American Muslim population, and they found that a large number of students had felt discrimination or bias from a teacher, just as Mr. Wright pointed out. And so I'm just wondering, in the reporting, what happens when a teacher is the person who is, being discriminatory or, having, putting forth bias statements or whatever? I think that both the parents and the student would be hesitant to report that teacher for fear of backlash. So is there a way of ensuring anonymity or protection or something like that for that kind of reporting?
Sure, I can absolutely address that. There is, and when those things are, and we do have Dr. Campbell here, who is a director right now of schools, and can speak to this. But if a student submits something such as that, if they submit that, if they have an allegation against any staff member in the building about a microaggression or hate bias, there's a process, there's a due process for that employee, and the administrator, the principal, is responsible for informing our compliance and investigations unit, right, to see if this is something that we can and should be investigating, and we have a threshold if potentially it's an act of hate bias, and we need to be able to consistently communicate and clear that with our partners in Montgomery County Police Department. Once they have identified that there is no threshold here for a crime, even if it may occur, we're not going to investigate, what have you, then the administration, right, will go through that, and we will follow our disciplinary process through our staff code of conduct with our progressive discipline process there. So that is the process that occurs, and certainly the director and the associate who supervise that school and the chief of schools are all aware of that and included in that process.
So I also think it's important to name the fact that there isn't always the level of trust for that, and so it's not necessary for a parent or a student to file that complaint with school administration, right? So there is the anonymous app for students. Parents can also go online, file. They can also call student compliance, welfare and compliance, and it's investigated that way. Because I also don't want to give the impression that when the harm has been caused by the adult, that then the family must then go to the source of where it is, because that then does not encourage reporting. So there are other avenues and ways that parents can report without even having to interact with the school at all.
I appreciate that. I had one go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Councilmember. I just want to see if I can take a stab at responding to, again, as we know, the recurring problem is the underreporting or no reporting. So it kind of begs the question, do we have a large number of complaints that have not been responded to? And going forward, should we be focusing on resolving those as we speak? So I'm wondering, do we have any, analytics or metrics to, one, determine what has been the number of complaints? I don't know if we say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or what are the number of complaints pending, the status of them, resolution or close to resolution, and then whether or not we're doing, on the other end, enough victim maintenance, if you will, because we heard the word traumatized and re-traumatized. And as we know, it's not a trite statement to say that hurt people hurt. So if these are not resolved, then, it's the likelihood that other people will be hurt. So I'm just wondering, what number, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn on that, but I think it would behoove us to have some kind of analytics and metrics. I don't know how far going back, if we're gathering that information, but certainly it would give us some, I think, guidance on what we need to be doing going forward.
It's a good question. I had the same question, and it's listed in the questions we've asked of our colleagues in MCPS as a follow-up to a recent public session that we had to talk about oversight at MCPS. So we're going to get those responses and see where we go from there. Final question for now, and then I might get back in the queue, is, and several of you have alluded to it, but social media and the construct of social media is just breeding even more of this hatred. And it's something that none of us completely have our arms around. I don't even have my arms around it in my own family, frankly. With two teenagers trying to navigate uncharted territory. And so it's unfair to expect our school system to be able to see and feel and touch, all that's out there. But it is arguably among the better positions of institutions to be able to track what's happening. And so, and we've discussed this in other contexts before. I know it's something the school system's very much focused on. Again, no easy solutions there, but it is something we're going to have to think through, and now starting at incredibly young ages, in order to be able to educate our kids about this very powerful tool that they have at their disposal and what it means. And so, no easy solution or answer there. I just bring that up because the vehicle that the bias is being used to be able to spread this hatred and fear is expanding. So, yeah. Did you have something to say to that?
It's interesting you wrote, as you were talking the last thing, I literally turned around, I literally wrote down social media.
Yeah.
Because what I wanted to bring up related to that, and in relation, and it's probably from a process standpoint, it might be helpful to have MCPS kind of explain. It's not just social media, it's also texting or WhatsApp or other forms, and where bullying is happening. It's not, a lot of us, I think, in this room, probably, if there was bullying, it was in the hallways, when we were in school or outside, on the playground. The way it is happening now and the way it is manifesting, and a lot of it is stemming from hate and bias towards the students, is outside of the classroom, sometimes outside of school hours, on social media apps, also in text message chains. And I know this from personal experience from my own child who was bullied in a text chain, and we had to bring it to the school. And the process, I understood and knew what it was because I am involved, but most of the other parents in there did not. And I'm just wondering if, from a process standpoint, because one of the things we talked about in the Jewish cohort was bullying and the ways we're seeing it show up, and a lot of it was not always in the classroom. There's a lot in the classrooms, in the hallways, but there's also a tremendous amount outside of that, and I think it's something we do have to grapple with, and there is nothing right now from a law standpoint, a policy standpoint that we are seeing that is really structured to help particularly parents navigate it. Because whether you put, say your kid can't be on something, your kid will also find a way to be on something, and that is a reality. And so what is the balance also when something happens outside school hours and where the school can and cannot intervene? And I'm just wondering if you could just kind of maybe walk through that.
I think I'm trying to clarify the question. Does it walk through what happens when there is an incident of hate on social media?
Yeah, whether it's social media, whether it's on texting, and it's not necessary, because these all come to the school, a lot of it, particularly when it's the school kids within the school, and also sometimes amongst various schools impacting several of them together. Yeah, I just think it might be helpful for people.
100%, absolutely. I wish that we could, and I wish it was part of our safety and security team. We do not have designated folks at the school level who are monitoring, key social media sites. If we could be in it and see it and be proactive and look for trends, we certainly would. That would be a benefit. Now, in terms of when an incident is reported, part of our reporting process is that we are identifying the location. Was this in traditional? Was it in the hallway? Was it in the classroom? Was it in the cafeteria? On the playground. We also have a field for social media. So we can tell you, we can see where those are coming from. If it is a social media allegation, then that brings into a whole other level, of investigation. So there's a series of things, and so is this something that occurred in the school? Was the text sent during school hours? Did somebody access their Instagram account during school hours? Did they use a school Chromebook or the school's Wi-Fi to do this? And if it's during the school hours, it is under the purview, of the school to investigate. But even if it is during the school hours or from a school device and within the purview of the school to investigate, then we still are going to engage with our police partners to ascertain whether or not this is a crime. If it raises the level of a crime in a criminal investigation, then we don't do anything. and we sit and we wait for the police to finish before we pursue any type of disciplinary response. The tricky part is this, and I'll speak from experience, as I'm sure any principal would. If you have students that are on their social media accounts or on chat groups at night, or even more so, I have a 16-year-old son, a lot of this happens on the video game chats.
Yeah.
So they're playing a video game, and they're playing with kids in the school, with kids in other schools, maybe another state. And they feel very free behind their avatars and their games to be able to do and say these things. So when we get something that is coming from, say, an evening event in the home, no MCPS device was used, so on and so forth, then and what we have to do is gauge, right? Is there impact on the school learning environment? So I know this is real. If students are engaging this behavior on a Saturday night at a party, right? So we don't suspend every kid that may punch another kid on a Saturday night or playing a pickup basketball game. We may not know about it. We may, right? If it bleeds into the schoolhouse, and that's kind of the rule of thumb. I'm sure you probably know this, but if it bleeds into the schoolhouse, so if I'm texting you and I'm bullying you or saying hateful things, hate bias, and then the next day I'm continuing to do it, or people that are aware that, and then they start doing it, and now you are a recipient of this hate in the schoolhouse, and the origin of this was on that social media platform from the night before. Now the school can get involved. But there is this line between what the school investigates through a disciplinary process, and it is to ensure that there is some separation between community events and school events. So it's tricky, and we do engage with the police. We do collaborate with our legal office, OGC, and so on and so forth if we have questions for clarity on that. But that's the rule of thumb.
Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Fulsome conversation. I will just say our rule is no social media in our house. We and I encourage people to adopt that rule as much as you can. There are always ways around it, but I think I've got it pretty locked down for now. But as you said, that's just one venue. The text chats, the Fortnite, Minecraft, go down the list of the video games. So it's a huge issue. Washington Post editorialized just a month or a half ago about cell phone usage in schools, saying it shouldn't be allowed. There's states that are moving in that direction, trying innovative things like when you come to the classroom, you got to put your phone in a box or something, or so you're not taking it away, but you're limiting the use in class. So I think those are all. But as you said, it happens outside of school too. So really important conversation. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for the hard work and good work that you all have been doing. The conversation between our cohort leads here and MCPS in front of us has actually been really interesting and informative and substantive. And so I'm wondering if you all have had an opportunity offline to sit down together and have some of those conversations.
So yeah, I'll field this. I was here, I think, in the very beginning of December when the leads first came before the council, and knowing that we were in the midst of really revamping our work around hate bias, and knowing that we were going to come forward after the new calendar year with Dr. Austin's team and putting this plan in place, my office reached out to, and I believe we were working with council staff that are present here in the room to be able to get the contact information of the leads. And so I asked for the contact information. We reached out and asked for a representative, right, one of the leads to come join us. And we had a doodle poll, what date works for you, what have you, and we landed on February 1st. And we had an in-person or a Zoom option. And so we invited everybody to come, and we wanted to walk everybody through what our thinking was and what our public-facing kind of framework was. And we did an internal crosswalk prior to that, and we were saying, okay, well, here's what each cohort recommended. Here is where we see it in the plan, right? Here is where it isn't, but it may be in some other place that it's currently existing in curriculum just because it's not in what we're thinking right now. So we did this. I think we had 3 out of the 6 folks present. We had emails back and forth. I can't make it. I have to do this. We did send out the information that we were going to go over on February 1st and solicited feedback. So we were able to do that, and so after we bring all of this forward to the Board of Education on March 19th, and as we think about that internal, external stakeholder group, where we want to have constant ongoing transparency and providing data and input, we absolutely have the task force members in mind for that. And I mean, I know that my commitment and Dr. Alston's commitment is that we continue to engage, right? We're just kind of at this place where we're working internally and then to bring something forward to the Board of Education.
Thank you. I see you reaching for the button, Mr. Wright.
Yeah, just to follow up, to Mr. Monteliano's credit, when our cohort had its listening session, he and I believe maybe 6 others of your staff, including the superintendent, attended our listening session, and they answered every question that was.
That was the student listening session?
That was, yes, ma'am. That was the student listening session.
Great.
And, within the constraints of the time.
Right.
And they even stayed on extra time. And I think we appreciated that they seemed to be fully committed to addressing the students' complaints. I will say this, though. Some of this, if we don't understand as a community that this is shared responsibility, that even the adults who were listening, who were not MCPS, had a role in, following up with the students, making sure that their complaints were actually heard. And, it led us to a later discussion that a lot of what we're seeing, and I asked Mr. Monteleo this question, and in fact, what did the what did he feel MCPS wanted from our cohort? And his response partly was more activity on the side of what they're learning outside of the school. So I took that to mean that, this is a situation where we're dealing with learned behavior and maybe, something stemming from what's going on in the homes. So probably what we need to add to this whole scenario when we do this work, which should not, of course, is not even close to being vacuous, but totally inclusive, to consider how we are involving parents as agents for change in their students' behavior. I'm old school, so what I used to get was those little notes in the report card about my behavior, and most times I felt the sting of that from my father. But I don't know where we are in that process. So, I mean, I certainly hope we are not attacking, but we're finding a way to deal with that, what works and that what doesn't work, and the people who are effective and the people that are not effective, while we place paramount the interests of our students. And lastly, I won't speak anymore, Councilmember. I know I'm voluminous, but I did want to go back to the other folk that we probably should have included as a cohort. And one that cries out is our African immigrant community and our immigrant Caribbean communities. We didn't include them. Neither did we include our mentally and physically challenged students who are also intersections and as recipients of hate and hate crime and bias. And then actually the educationally challenged students who are IEPs or, we used to call them on the short bus. That's certainly not politically correct anymore, but they feel the brunt also of hate bias and hate incidents as well. So I hope we would, be as inclusive as possible, which will be a long and ongoing process as we, try to eradicate most of this stuff. Thank you.
Thanks very much. There's certainly no shortage of work to do in this field, absolutely, and much appreciate the work to coordinate those conversations and to continue those conversations moving forward. Obviously, you all are a tremendous resource here, and not one that we want MCPS or us here at the council or in the county more broadly to lose access to. The relationships and the coalitions that you have created through this work and the lines of communication that you have, this is another really a great opportunity for us to be receiving feedback through you all. So that's great to hear that there's ongoing communication there. And Mr. Montgomery, you mentioned that you all had gone through and systemically gone through like the bullet point list of these recommendations to figure out how does this fit in, and what are we going to do on this. It would be great if we could get a rundown of that. That would be really helpful. Acknowledging, of course, that some of that is going to become clearer as you go through the steps of the plan, but if that could just be indicated there, that would be helpful. Ms. Cagri?
So a few weeks ago, CUA, a Committee United Against Hate, had a listening session for Muslims in this county, and we lined up a number of students to speak, and they pulled out. They got very nervous. A couple of them did speak, but it was with their cameras off and anonymously, and their stories were very sad. I don't know if you listened in on that. You weren't in on that meeting, but it's recorded, so you can find it on YouTube. I urge you to listen to the experiences of the Muslim students in their schools, and just the fact that we had lined up many, many more students to talk about their experiences, and that they were too afraid to come forward in public. And even when we guaranteed that you don't have to use your name, you don't have to show your face, even then they felt that the backlash would be so severe, they were bullied so severely that they didn't want to speak. So that's a big change from the Montgomery County that I knew before, and I think that the school system really needs to look at that.
Mr. Edmondson and I were both on that. We were actually panelists, so yes, we did hear from those students, and those who were not present, we heard that as well.
Thank you. And I think that does go to the point that some of you have mentioned or touched on, that we need to be fostering conversations amongst our students and providing them with the tools to be able to have difficult conversations and be respectful of each other. And that's how we're going to build a community in which we can all prosper together, and figuring out what role we can all better play in that, and our school system can continue to play in that. Another of the common themes that we've heard is around professional development. Can you talk a little bit about how you all are thinking about that? Because obviously, as it is now, if we don't expand the amount of time, there's limited time. There's a lot of work to be done here. We're really hearing the importance of significant professional development expansion in this arena, not just modules that folks can click through, and the need to make sure that it's touching all staff, and the need to make sure that it is developed in collaboration with the impacted community, which of course is diverse in and of itself. So any of that you might be able to touch on would be helpful.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, when we think of this professional development and this professional learning, we're not proponents of the module of going online and clicking, right? These are the conversations that have to be face-to-face, right, where we can actually engage in challenge thinking and challenge beliefs. So as I begin to share about the professional development, I will just preface it with the fact that all of this professional learning that I'm speaking of is face-to-face professional learning, not so much of modules where you log in in your jammies and slippers, right, and can try to multitask, right, and engage in professional learning as you were doing a series of other things. Right? Okay. So there are a couple of things that we have been working on and currently in place. So we currently have a part of professional learning for this summer we're working on is a mandatory professional learning for all of our admin, right, so that they can begin, and then rolling that forward to all of our employees, right, and all three of our associations. We're currently in the process of working.
Apologies, I don't want to interrupt, but would you be able to be a little more specific about what's going to be included in that summer training?
I can, but it's kind of early, so we're in the process of developing, right, but it is looking at understanding differences, looking at understanding hate, bias, and looking at it from different aspects, looking at it from the racial aspect, from the religious aspect, from gender and sexuality aspect, right? So really trying to be all-encompassing in that as much as possible in regards to that, but we are currently in the process of building, so I don't want to tell an untruth as to what's in it and what's not, and inadvertently neglect to add something, right? We're also in the process of developing and building some additional optional. And so I believe we have to do both, right? There are some individuals who are not going to participate in any other than what we've identified as mandatory, but there are others who want to learn more, right? And so we're trying to provide both. And so as we look at some of the optional professional learnings as well, we should have one that's actually going live on March 6th that looks at the humanity of hate, right? And how do we put a halt to hate? And so we've been working on that one, and that starts in March. We're also in the process of creating 3-credit MSDE approved courses to help our employees understand how to understand our students and our populations, right? And so there currently is a course entitled Understanding the Muslim Student that's been run. It's a semester-wide course, and so it's been running. This is its 6th semester in which it's been run, and so we're in the process of writing to expand that, and so that you will then see one entitled, it may not be entitled, but encompassing different groups, right? So understanding our LGBTQ plus student, understanding our Jewish student, understanding our Asian student, understanding our Hispanic student, understanding black males, understanding black and brown girls. We're also in the process of building one in regards to understanding how to engage in culture responsive engagement for our families. And so as we think about who's building those courses, right? And so we intentionally made sure that the leads for each of those courses and the groups that they've identified to be a part of that team are members of the group that they're writing about, right? And so it's not a value for me, Christian, to write the course in understanding the Jewish student, right? My perspective, my knowledge, depth of knowledge is not there that I can write an effective course to be able to touch, right? And so we were very mindful of that. When we think of these courses, they are 3-credit courses, so it's 15 sessions, 3 hours each session, and again, this is face-to-face, right? So that's where we currently are in regards to building and development.
Thank you. And are there plans for moving forward, shifting some of these requirements from being optional to being mandatory?
Yes, there are, and I neglected one. There's also one that we're working on for parents as well, right? And so we recognize that as instances occur and we try to encourage parents to talk to your children, there are parents who want to talk to their children but don't know how to talk to their children, right? And so it's not just enough to say, this situation occurred, please engage in conversation with your child, right? And so looking at how do we partner with our NAACP parent reps, our MCCPTA parent reps to support in the development as well as the education for parents so that we can support in that aspect as well. And then as you mentioned, looking to see how can we begin to transfer and incorporate more of these being mandatory and not just optional.
Thank you.
Could I yeah.
Please.
So I just want to say, like, when we talk about mandatory, so what we absolutely have as mandatory is the training that Dr. Alston talked about, mandatory for all school-based and central office administrators this summer. And so just to kind of paint a picture for folks about how do things get to scale, right? Because when people have experiences with MCPS, they have experiences at their individual school. And then oftentimes those experiences at the individual school, to no fault of the parent or the student, are we hear about them as if they're a monolithic experience, right, of MCPS. And so when we approach training, traditionally in MCPS, where we've been very effective, and I'll talk about it, I mean, I can point to our implicit bias training. I can talk about the equity work that we've really been doing since hardcore since about 2013, 14. And when we think about just old school teacher training, pedagogy, right, best instructional practices, the most effective way to do this is through a macro and a micro perspective. So the macro perspective is what most adults generally think of. I go to a meeting, I sit there for 3 hours, somebody's in front of a PowerPoint, maybe we talk to our elbow partners, we do something along those lines. But the most effective change of adult behavior, and this is absolutely research-based and not just from our experience in MCPS, is when it is job-embedded professional learning, right? And professional development versus professional learning. That macro, where it's one time in its event, is professional development. Learning is a progression. Learning is consistent. Learning is making it meaningful for what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So an approach to decreasing the variability, when Dr. Alston said they'll bring this forward to their staff, what that looks like is those administrators go back to their schools, and as part of their school improvement process, as part of their staff learning progression, this work is embedded, right, throughout that entire calendar school year. And the accountability for that occurs through the equity unit, it occurs through the school supervisory directors, it occurs through the climate data and the voice data that we get and the academic data that we see. So that is a model really for how you get this baked into all 211 schools at all of the levels. The other thing that I do want to say about the training, and I'll just say it, I know there's a lot of interest, right, about ensuring that every single group that has experienced harm, that their true story and the true experience is told and is part of any training that we do. And we completely agree with that. I want to just really state that. And to ensure that we are not putting ourselves in a room and making this up and not consulting with people who are living this and experiencing this and are professionals in these areas. As a part of that, MCPS also is approaching this holistically. I think that's important to note. We are not elevating one group over another group. We are not placing priority or having recency bias over certain events, because we know that we have students in this district who have experienced hate bias for years and years. And American hate bias, external, any of the events. So I really want to say that we are approaching this holistically, and we are looking, yes, to include and to ensure that all different perspectives and all stories and all of the harm and all of these can be included, but we are not elevating, right, one group over another, because we are serving all of our students.
Thanks. Last question I wanted to clarify, Dr. Olson, you mentioned that there's a one-to-one system now for when complaints come in to make sure that they are accounted for. Am I understanding this right? They're accounted for, that they receive a response. And so what it was or is the timing on that implementation? Because what I'm hearing is that that has not been the experience so far, right? So I'm assuming that this was not a system that was in place before, because if it was, it wasn't working, right? So is that in place now, or when will it be?
So I'm going to leave the Greg for a little bit of this, and I can start. So, come on, Greg.
It wasn't expected to be at the table. Sorry about the information.
You can just introduce yourself.
My name is Greg Edmondson, Director of Student Welfare and Compliance. And so this process started this school year, so in the end of August. And we do not have a timeline because cases are individual, and some could take, if it's being investigated with our partners in the police, it could take days or weeks, or it could be closed out very quickly. So we don't have a specific timeline. But we have a process within my office where my team ensures that every single one of those cases is closed out. And we follow up directly with the school principal to ensure that that process is, you asked about numbers. You had said you're going to be scheduling a time for us I will certainly have those numbers for you specifically. But right now, out of the cases that we have about 6 that are still open. So, and they usually average 2 or 3 weeks before we can close out each case, just to make sure that if there's any discipline, if there's any victim support, that's all included in the closeout, to make sure we have supportive measures plans in place for our students. So.
Thank you, Mr. Edmondson. And then when you say closed out, so that means that a reply has been sent to the principal. Is part of that closing out process to ensure that communication, some kind of communication, some type of closure or follow-up is done with the student and or family?
So that was a part of the addition. You remember back in the spring when we shared out, and County Council was significant in developing that flow chart that we talked about and that we shared. So we added to that this fall with communication to the parents of students who were involved specifically, if they're able to be identified, with letters of it being closed and next steps, as well as within those letters supports that we have for their children.
And that's a requisite part of closing out a complaint?
That's a part of our process since the start of the school year.
Thank you. And then for anonymous complaints, is there a way to reply to sender in any kind of fashion, or is that just not?
It makes it much more difficult,
right?
Obviously, because that communication, we don't know exactly who we're communicating with. But we try to investigate as much as possible. Meeting with victims is a significant part of an investigation, to be able to get not only the facts and the details of the incident, but also the disposition that really makes a difference as far as what supports we want to put in place for the victim. So anonymous complaints really are more difficult, but we try to follow the process as aligned as our current process as we can. And if we're able to identify an offender, even without the victim, we'll still follow that communication process with the offender's family.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And as you switch back, one more population that I wanted to just note to flag for MCPS is our newcomer population. When we have an influx of immigrants coming from a particular area, we often see friction in the schools with those populations. And so I really, systemically, I know that there are folks, working on the newcomer side of things, doing very good work in MCPS, but thinking about what can be done systemically on the front end, proactively in our schools when we see those things happening, to ensure that there is education to the population of students who is already there, and that there's, that empathy and understanding, because we do see that bubble up into sometimes physical altercations. And so if there's something proactive that can be being done more systemically on the front end where we can be assured that it's happening in every school, that would be helpful.
Can I address that? Thank you for that question. And we must be thinking the exact same thing. I've been monitoring this, and I've been out to both an elementary school, and we had some things that occurred, I think, at some high schools over the last couple weeks as well, with an influx of folks from a different country and assimilating, not just a bad word, I should say, just integrating right into the school community. So a process upgrade. So I also have international enrollment under my shop, and Ms. Margarita Borges, who does incredible work and has really systematized and created data systems that weren't in place prior to a couple of years ago. One of the questions that I asked when I was looking at some of the same things that I think you may be referencing was, I know we track by level, and I know we track all these things. Do we track by school? And do we send reports to individual schools on a routine basis, or alert others in the district? We're seeing an influx, right? We're seeing an uptick of this particular group to this particular cluster. And then increasing the relationships that we have and the touch points we have with the resettlement agencies, who are often at the center of ensuring that there's adequate housing for groups as they come in. So this is all fluid and real, and so as we strengthen those partnerships with those resettlement agencies and let them know that we need that information on the front end, and we can't just find out when kids are showing up to Rocking Horse or to the schools themselves, because our principals, to give them credit, they will tell you, I don't enroll students, I enroll families, right? And so this is really significant to us. I just want to say that we are on it. We're developing that system right now with our partners in technology so that we can flag that and have those automated reports to schools, and then rally the resources that are needed in addition to just the data mining.
Right,
So
and
thank
emphasizing that, needing that to include education and information to the broader community outside of that newcomer population as well, so that the students there understand who they are welcoming and why at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. All really, really important points. Underscores Mr. Vasquez's point about translation services and interpretation being really, really key. So I just want to make a couple points as we close out. We will come back to these issues on the committee. This is what's clear is that we're going to need more staffing and expertise, not less. We had a whole big hearing about DCI, the Department of Compliance and Investigations, in relationship to our adults in the building and the capacity issues there. Obviously, there's capacity related to this work, and not only capacity, but education and training and understanding of what the issues are. The other thing that is the curriculum and the training itself. The bill has been mentioned in Annapolis a couple times, or the bills, there's multiple bills related to more education, required education for high school and middle schools in the Holocaust and the Islamophobia. We're one of the few states that doesn't require Holocaust education. Most do. I know most of our private schools in this community do it already. I think it's important that we move in that direction, as well as on all history here. We are, as Councilmember Alvarez mentioned, we're already the community where we have everything here. And so it's good news, bad news. We're on the cutting edge of trying to figure this out. I will suggest to MCPS and to the community college, I know we didn't really get into that aspect, that even though this task force has ended, for the council's point of view, we're still going to be talking about these issues. Let's get ahead of the curve. Whatever passes, let's be talking now about, because what will happen, the state board will get a consultant and they'll make recommendations on curriculum, but we're the largest school district in the state, the most diverse. Let's make sure we're working with these cohort groups and their members and others in a really intentional way to have the really difficult conversation that Councilmember Mink talked about of what should be the appropriate type of knowledge about no one's going to disagree should people know about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, or at least no one at this table is going to disagree about that. But what that there will be disagreement about what that means in terms of curriculum. And that, so let's look ahead. Let's not wait, because these bills, as I was looking at them as you're sitting here, some of them are going to require some of this information to be in place for next year. So let's do it right now. We have what we need in the room to have the difficult conversations and model for our kids about what, how to have the appropriate level of constructive debate and with the appropriate level of historical context. And by the way, our teachers are already stretched to the max. We owe it to them to come to them and be very clear about what we're going to ask them to do. I would just ask that MCPS, and you can comment if you want, but that you really use, I'm glad you got together February 1st with some of this group, but I think between this group and the members of the group, you have a lot, and everyone that lives in this community, you have a really engaged community that can help you get ahead of that right now, because I highly doubt that the curriculum will be, you have to do exactly this. There's going to be some room for interpretation when it comes down from the state board, or before they decide what it is, if they do say exactly this, there's going to be room for comment and input, and we should be prepared to be a part of that, leading that effort. Does that make sense, Mr. Mountain? Do the group members agree? I just think, look, we're not going to all agree on it, and I don't agree in my own household on everything, but what we can do is set up a process to have those tough conversations and model that so that we can be ready for it. So, and get ahead of the curve. So I really appreciate everyone coming today. As I mentioned, we will follow up on some of the really on all these items. Some of it we'll talk about during budget. Some of it we'll talk about post-budget, because there are obviously budgetary implications to much of this work in the schools and at HHS and other places. So really appreciate all of your efforts, and with that, we are adjourned. Thanks.
Watch for the new traffic pattern on University Boulevard between Arcola Avenue and Inwood Avenue. New bus-only lanes are opening Monday, February 19, 2024.
We will continue to monitor transportation conditions throughout the day. When those conditions change,